Hi. I haven't made a video for quite a while on this channel, and the reason is that this is really a video diary that I've been doing about my underactive thyroid and how I treated it. And for the last few years my thyroid seems to have been functioning very well until recently, and I seem to have had a real setback over the last few months. So what happened? In November I got ill, which is nothing unusual. Lots of people were getting ill at that time, but it was quite a bad illness. And then I got better. I was well for a few weeks, but then in January I got ill again, and it seemed really strange because for the 5 years before that I wasn't ill at all. I didn't have as much as a sniffle. I was fine all through the COVID and everything, and so it was quite a shock to suddenly get ill. So of course people think, well, it was either COVID or something post-viral that made me so ill, and I just didn't know what it was at first. But over the last few months I've been putting a lot of thought into this, and it seems that I had some sort of trigger to my thyroid, and I think what I had was a kind of thyroiditis. Now, I just want to mention a disclaimer. This is not medical advice. I've had no medical diagnosis of this issue. It's purely based on my own intuition and my own reading of my bodily signals. I see it as part of the general discussion on thyroid issues, which are so common. So many people have problems with the thyroid, and even if they do get medical treatment, it's often not satisfactory. It's a very complex issue. So what I'm discussing in this video is just based on my own information that I've read from my own body and my own intuition. So what happened was last year, November 2022, and it was at the end of November, I got a cold, and I was surprised because I hadn't had a cold for about 5 years. Didn't seem anything unusual. I work as a therapist, and I booked some clients and I postponed their appointments because I didn't want to infect them. I actually felt it wasn't a bad cold. I could have gone to see them, but I just didn't want to be infectious. So I postponed them for a few days, and I felt after a few days that I was getting better. But then, I think about 3 days after I started getting ill, suddenly things took a downturn, and I started getting a real pain in my throat. And it just got worse and worse. So I contacted my clients and said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to postpone you again, and I'll just let you know when I'm feeling better. So the next day I felt really ill. I had a really, really sore throat, and I was just exhausted. The other thing was I'd lost my appetite, and the only thing I wasn't eating anything, I was just drinking lots of tea, and I found it was really painful to swallow. The other interesting thing was that I wasn't really coughing and sneezing a lot. I think I had a bit of a blocked up feeling at first when the cold first started, but as I got worse, my airways were completely clear. I wasn't blocked up. I wasn't sneezing or sniffling. It was just the real feeling of the swollen feeling in my throat and the pain in my throat, and also the terrible fatigue and loss of appetite as well. So I was in bed feeling really ill for at least a week. And after that, even when I was up and about, I really felt quite fatigued, quite tired, and it was about 3 weeks before I felt really better. And by that time it was about mid-December. So the Christmas rush was already starting, and I booked a cottage. I was going away with my family for a few days. But luckily my energies came back, had a brilliant time. I went walking, did loads over the Christmas period, and then came back for a couple of days and went away for New Year to a different cottage with friends. Had a great New Year, did a few hill walks, went to a ceilidh on Hogmanay, ate a lot, drank a lot, danced all night, had a brilliant time, and then returned home on January the 2nd. And on the 3rd, I remember it really clearly, I was keeping my diary as well. I came back on the 3rd of January. I was just putting things away, sorting things out, posting on social media about my photographs and things. And then it was that evening I suddenly started feeling really, really cold, and it seemed to be around my core that was the worst affected. And it was so bad that I was literally shivering. So I remember checking the temperature. It was 20 degrees, so usually that's fine. But I just thought I must be really tired, went to bed with all my clothes on. I even had some big fluffy socks on, but still it was really a real struggle just to warm up. I was literally shivering. And then I started getting a terrible headache. I hardly ever get headaches. I've never had a migraine, but I actually wondered whether that was my first ever migraine. And I was meant to be meeting my sister the next day for lunch. And so I messaged her and said, I think I'm having my first ever migraine. I feel dreadful, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to come tomorrow. She said that it didn't sound like a migraine to her, but anyway, I took some paracetamol, but that had no effect whatsoever. And then I started feeling really nauseous. So I actually dragged myself out of bed, got a sick bowl. My headache just would not go away. And this went on for a few hours. Eventually I took some ibuprofen, and that helped alleviate the pain. The headache went away, and I was able to get to sleep at about 3:30 a.m. The next morning I woke up at 11:30, felt much, much better. The headache had gone. I wasn't feeling sick anymore. Felt a wee bit groggy, but I contacted my sister and said, look, I'll come for lunch. I'll be a bit late. Went for lunch, ate almost everything, felt fine. Remember we had a chat in the afternoon, and then we took the dogs out for a wee walk. And then I went back home, and suddenly I started feeling ill again. I just started feeling more and more tired. And again, it was my throat. Just started being really painful, felt as if it was swelling up. I remember I was worried in case I had an infection, didn't want to infect my sister and her family. So I was really keeping an eye out to see whether I was coughing and sneezing, but I wasn't. So it seemed really strange. My airways were clear, but my throat was agony, and it was really painful to swallow anything. But again, my appetite after that just disappeared, and I was just drinking cups of fruit tea, but it was so painful to swallow. And this time it seemed worse. I was in bed for another week, but really it was difficult to communicate to people how ill I was feeling. I just was too ill to read. I was listening to an audiobook at one point, but I was mostly just sleeping and sleeping. And I thought, what the hell? How come I haven't been ill for 5 years, and then suddenly I'm hit by two really bad illnesses so close together? And I started eventually thinking, I'm sure this is something to do with my thyroid, but I didn't know what. I just felt intuitively that it was something to do with my thyroid. I also wondered whether it was flu, because I'd looked the symptoms for COVID, and it didn't seem that I had many of those symptoms. It seemed more like flu. I also felt mentally a bit weird. I felt quite paranoid, and at one point I suddenly thought that I had bird flu, and I thought, oh no. I'd made cocktails for my friends, and I'd actually used an egg white in the cocktails, and I thought, I've got bird flu, I'm really ill, and they're all going to die. You know, I was that paranoid. I also thought I'd been poisoned by alcohol, because there was someone at the New Year gathering who had kindly brought some vodka, which was from Poland. It was 60% proof, and apparently a Polish friend of his had actually made it. So I thought, even though I'd only had a couple of sips of it, I thought maybe I've poisoned myself and everyone else is dead or something. I mean, it was wild. But I convinced myself that I had bird flu for about 36 hours, and then I realised that the symptoms for bird flu are very similar to the symptoms for ordinary influenza. So I thought it was that. Eventually, I did an online search for flu and thyroid, because I just thought my thyroid's involved here at some point. And I learned about Quervain's, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, Quervain's thyroiditis. And what reinforced that even more was that when I finally started feeling better, I had put my name down for a meetup to do orienteering. I'd never done orienteering before. It's something that I've always wanted to do. And I'd booked it a while ago, and I thought, I'm not sure whether I'll be well enough to do this. But I'd started feeling a lot better. This was about mid-January now. And I thought I'd better check, better make sure. I don't want to rush back into activities and then find that I go down again with this, whatever it is. So 2 days before the orienteering, I did a run, just a 2 kilometre run. I thought, I'll see how I feel after the run, see how I feel the next day, and then decide whether I'm going orienteering. Luckily, I felt great after the run. I just thought, brilliant, this is so good, I'm better. The next day I was still feeling good. So on Sunday I went orienteering, had a brilliant time, loved it, felt great all day. The only thing I noticed was that after the orienteering we had lunch together and I couldn't finish my soup, which is quite unusual for me. I'm usually a bit of a pig. In the evening I was looking up orienteering clubs. I thought, I'm going to do more of this, I love it. The next day I got up bright and early, had a webinar, enjoyed the webinar, and then I had some things to do on the computer. And then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon I suddenly started feeling aches in my lower back, and they just got worse and worse. So I'm someone who never ever sleeps during the day. I don't have naps or anything, but this was really bad, and I thought, I've got to lie down. So I lay down on my yoga mat, covered myself in a blanket. I thought I'd have 10 minutes rest. As soon as I lay down, I felt like I was being engulfed in fatigue. I was just so tired, felt ill again. And I ended up having to go to bed. Just went straight to sleep, slept right through till 11 o'clock the next morning. Woke up, still felt really groggy, and realised, because a friend had been messaging me and reminding me that I was meant to be going out for a talk that evening, but there's no way I could have gone. I felt so ill by then, and I just said, I'm really sorry. I was devastated because I'd been looking forward to it. In the end, I was in bed again for another couple of days. Yeah, it was very worrying, and it just didn't seem like any normal illness. A couple of people suggested it could have been post-viral fatigue, so I definitely took that seriously. I thought it might be the case. But when I found out about the Quervain thyroiditis, that seemed to be the most likely thing. Either that or something similar. I just felt that it was my thyroid. And other things that backed this up were that I have been trying to get back into climbing. I stopped climbing. I used to go climbing at the climbing centre. I loved it. But when lockdown came along, I wasn't able to do that. And then I moved away. So the climbing centre was far away. So I've kind of let my strength go. And I've been trying to build up my strength by going to the gym over last year, 2022. And because of that, I've been keeping a logbook of how I felt. I just didn't want to overtrain. And that logbook has been really interesting, and it showed that I had several bouts of unexpected fatigue and tiredness in the last half of last year, 2022. Just a few times I'd written really tired after going climbing or something like that. And the other thing that I'd noticed was that I had neck pain quite a lot, which could have been related to the training. I don't think it was, because the neck pain continued once I stopped the training because I was too tired and was worried about getting ill. So it's almost as if I've been fitting the jigsaw pieces together. So I've been doing the high-dose iodine protocol on and off since 2016. Does this setback mean that that protocol has failed? Absolutely not. The difference between the way I felt in 2015 and 2016, when I first had the thyroid problems, and the way I've been feeling recently are like night and day. And I think the main difference is that back in 2015 and 2016, it was a kind of chronic thyroid, underactive thyroid syndrome, whereas recently it's been more acute. I've been feeling energetic for a while and then suddenly got really fatigued. So it's as if something, which I think has probably been these viruses, have been triggering my thyroid. But I think at the basis, at the bottom of all this, my thyroid was getting weaker in 2022 and I just hadn't really noticed it. So in 2015, 2016, when I first had the thyroid problems and realised that things weren't right, at that time, the first thing was that I put so much weight on very quickly and I could not lose weight, whereas before that I'd never had a problem with my weight. And then the other thing was, at that time, way back 6 years ago or whatever, I was so tired that I was sleeping for about 10 hours or sometimes more than that every single night, night after night, and waking up still feeling unrefreshed. And it didn't matter if I just forced myself to get up. I was just weary all the time. I went away for a relaxing holiday for 4 weeks. I thought that would help, because I had been doing a lot before that. It's a long story, but I may have been burnt out. But even after really relaxing for weeks and eating good healthy food, having lots of sunshine, I came back and I was still just tired and lethargic. But recently it's been a different thing altogether. So now I'll do lots of energetic things, but then I'll go through a phase where I'm suddenly, something has been triggered and I've been really tired and really ill. But then between those illnesses, I've been up and about doing lots of energetic things. So that's the difference. It's almost like an acute reaction now, whereas back then it was a much more chronic thing. When I got better after doing the high dose protocol, iodine protocol, for about a year back in 2016, 2017, I suddenly got much fitter, and then I was able to lose weight. It was really brilliant. And then I remember I was taking a lot of records of my basal temperature, and for a while my temperature seemed to be going up and up and up, and it got to about 37.4 degrees centigrade, and it didn't come down. And that's when I started worrying. This is about 2018, thinking maybe I'm overdoing this. And maybe I overreacted because I stopped taking iodine at that point. And then I reintroduced it, but at a very, very low dose for a while. And I continued to have that very low dose. I think it was about 6.25 milligrams a day, which conventionally is a high dose. But I think it wasn't enough, and I think maybe my iodine reserves have gone down in that time. So in 2020, I started taking the high dose iodine again. And I think it always takes a while. It takes a while for your iodine reserves to go down, and then it takes a while for them to be built up again. The other thing I should point out is that this is my experience. I think that with me, iodine seems to be key. I also think that my thyroid, I may have a genetic issue with a weak thyroid or something, because I know my dad had similar problems, although he didn't take iodine, but he had to have a internal goiter removed in his 60s, so I don't want to have that. He had a lot of the symptoms that I've had. I think with some people they might have, for example, Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition that can affect the way that their thyroid hormones operate. So that can be another aspect. I think, I can't be certain, and I have actually sent off for a blood test so I can get a more accurate picture, but I think with me it is probably around the weakness of my thyroid in some way, and also my iodine reserves seem to have a tendency to go quite low. So I think I need to keep my iodine reserves up, and I need to monitor that. And that last year the reserves were running out, and it probably got weaker and weaker. And I'd noticed also that the iodine tablets I was taking, I wasn't sure whether they were being absorbed properly. And again, this is a very vague area. It was a feeling I had. I couldn't tell. So for a while I started crushing them to make sure they were absorbed, and to taking them with food. But this can be, this isn't necessarily a good thing, because the tablets are designed to have a slow release so that you're getting iodine throughout the day. So after a while I started taking Lugols again, liquid Lugols. And in the past when I've tried that, it's negatively affected my digestion. So it gave me digestive problems. On this occasion, I took it with food and it was fine for about 6 weeks. And then I started getting the digestive problems again. So after that, I managed to find a new brand of iodine tablets because again in the UK it can be quite difficult to find iodorol and it was getting more and more expensive as well. So I found this brand Credence and I've been taking that. I think it's working well. It's a vague area, like I say, not easy to pinpoint, but I think that the Credence iodine seems to be working well. But anyway, all these things take time to work, and I just think that last year my thyroid was in a weak state, and then when I got this cold, it seems to have triggered this overreaction of my thyroid. And it's really interesting to see how de Quervain's thyroiditis manifests. So this is what the NHS website says about de Quervain's thyroiditis. It says de Quervain's, in other words subacute thyroiditis, is a painful swelling of the thyroid gland thought to be triggered by a viral infection such as mumps or flu. Interestingly, I had mumps years ago and it was really bad, but this time it definitely wasn't the mumps. But it may have been flu, or it may have been the norovirus, or maybe it was flu in November and the norovirus in January. It's most commonly seen in women aged 20 to 50, so I'm over 50. It usually causes high temperature and a pain in the neck, jaw or ear. Well, I didn't notice pain in my jaw or ear, but I certainly noticed it in the neck. And strangely, I also had pain in the lower back, and when it was really at my worst, when the illness was at its worst, I seemed to have pains all over my body, but constantly changing position. It was very odd. The thyroid gland can also release too much thyroid hormone into the blood, leading to symptoms of an overactive thyroid gland, hyperthyroidism. These symptoms settle after a few days. Symptoms of an underactive thyroid gland often follow, lasting weeks or months before the gland recovers completely. So maybe when I first had this in November, I felt better afterwards, but maybe I wasn't completely better. And I hope that I'm getting better now. Palpitations and shakes associated with thyrotoxicosis can be treated with beta blockers. Well, again, I didn't want to have those kinds of treatments. And I didn't really have palpitations and shakes, to be honest. Unless I think about when I first got that terrible shivering associated with the cold that I had when I first got the norovirus, which I think it was the norovirus. Occasionally, de Quervain's thyroiditis may come back, or the low thyroid hormone levels may be permanent. Hopefully that's not the case with me. So why don't I go to the doctor? Would a doctor not be able to establish whether it is de Quervain's thyroiditis or not? The reason I haven't gone to the doctor is because when I've gone to the doctor in the past, because I thought I might have thyroid issues and I've had blood tests, the doctor has flatly denied that it could have anything to do with my thyroid. And in fact, the blood test showed that I was in good health. And this has happened with 2 different doctors at my practice. The last time it happened was about a year ago because I had high cholesterol. So I had to talk to the doctor about that. And the doctor was great. He said that it was the right kind, the good kind of high cholesterol, and that I definitely should not be on statins and that I should continue doing whatever I'm doing, he said. But having said all that, he flatly refused to say that I could have any issues with my thyroid. And who knows, maybe he's right. Maybe my other doctor's right as well. My sister's also a doctor, and she does believe that I've had thyroid issues. She understands that they can be misinterpreted. The blood test results can be misinterpreted. And I think because she knows me well, she's been able to see that all hasn't been right with me, even though the blood tests seem to be great. I'm worried that if I go to the doctor and say, look, I've been really ill twice, they'll misdiagnose me and panic and think that I've got something that I haven't. So I thought it's best probably to treat this myself. I'm not at death's door, at least I hope I'm not. And the other thing is that things do seem to have been improving recently. So this last bout of illness happened in January. I've been really careful to take as much rest as I need so that I don't jeopardise myself and my health again. And also, I've been doing a lot to try and heal my thyroid in slightly different ways than I have in the past. And I think I'll discuss this in a different video because it's quite a complex topic in itself. Again, it's not medical advice. It's not in any way scientific because this is just me. I've been trying several different types of things and I can't say exactly which thing that I've been trying has been working. But I've been taking my temperature religiously. And I've actually been recording it via the rectum this time. In the past I've just put the thermometer in my mouth. And I think that can be low in accuracy. I think if you don't get it in the right bit under your tongue, it can vary. In the rectum it's much more accurate and you get a good result every time. And that's shown me that in general my temperature seems to be going up. When I was ill, my temperature was raised quite high. It was quite high initially because with the Quervain's thyroiditis, if it is that, you tend to get kind of hyperthyroidism for a day or two. It elevates your thyroid becomes overactive, but just temporarily, and then it comes down. So it's almost like your immune system goes into action, and then maybe that takes a toll on your iodine reserves. So again, then because you're low on iodine, you're depleted, it goes down to underactive. I think that's how it works. So my temperature was very high at first and then it went very low, and for a while it was, sometimes about 36.1 degrees C. But recently it's been on average 36.7, sometimes 36.6, sometimes 36.8. So it seems to be following a kind of upwards curve, up and down sometimes. For example, if I've been doing a lot of strenuous exercise and then the next day I feel really tired, sometimes my temperature's gone down a bit, but it comes up more quickly. I don't get this kind of terrible crash that lasts for a few days. So it seems that whatever I'm doing does seem to be right. I seem to be on the mend. 36.7 is still fairly low for a temperature, but it's not dangerously low. I would like it to be a bit higher. 37 seems to be the optimum level. So in the next video, I'm going to discuss the measures that I've been taking to heal my thyroid. I'm still taking high doses of iodine. I've actually increased the dose to 62.5 mg per day. But at the same time, I felt that my thyroid has been working very hard for me. It's been, obviously, it seems to be at the front line, I think. The thyroid is at the front line of many things. I mean, it deals with, it's basically the thermostat of the body. So it's regulating your temperature. It's helping to combat things that are coming into the body. I'm not explaining this very well because I'm not a doctor. This is the way I see things. It's helping you deal with toxins, like whether that's from pollution or from food or from even the things that you cook your food in or plastic, who knows. It's also helping you deal with emotional stresses, and I think that's been another thing with me. And it deals with that so well, but sometimes it just has too much of a load to deal with, and that's when things start going wrong. This is my theory. So I thought my thyroid needs a bit of love, and that's what I've been trying to give it. It sounds woo-woo, And it is. I've been applying woo-woo to my thyroid, and I'll discuss the things that I've been doing in the next video. Thanks for watching.